think for me, it's listening to those nudges because when we're given information from the universe, spirit, God, however you call it, okay, when we're given that information, do we do something with it or do we just sit with it? Co creating with the universe is about ebbing and flowing, about saying, okay, yes, you're giving me this idea here. I'm going to bring it into the 3D world. It's about really listening to those nudges, even the really quiet ones, and acting on it. Also, that we can offer gratitude for those nudges. The more nudges the universe sends, the more signs you get. And so co creating is about giving a voice to your higher soul self. That's so important.
Hi, friends. I'm your host, Donna Bell. Welcome back to another episode of To Hum is Human, the podcast where we explore how tuning into our intuition helps us express our most passionate purpose. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Today, we will explore living in flow, how to co create with the universe, because when we say yes, everything else will flow. And I'm so thrilled to introduce today's guest. Deb DeCelle is an internationally recognized educational medium and mentor who helps people awaken and trust their intuitive abilities. Known for her compassion, grounded approach, she offers intuitive guidance, evidential mediumship, and mentoring that empower individuals to live with greater clarity and purpose. Deb is also the best-selling author of The Intuitive Entrepreneur, Deeper Connections for Soul-Driven Success, and host of The Intuitive Edge, where soul meets strategy on the Women's Channel on Easy Way TV. She has studied at the Omega Institute and Arthur Findlay College and has taught around the globe, including the renowned spiritual community of Lilydale in Western New York. Welcome, Deb.
Thank you for having me, Donnabelle.
Deb, before you taught mediumship or mentored others, you were growing up in upstate New York. When you look back now, what were the earliest moments that hinted your life might unfold along a spiritual path?
Well, the first time I ever experienced a loss, I was about 5 years old, and it was a classmate who had drowned at a state park. And it wasn't like he came to me or anything. It's just that that's my first memory of that type of experience. And then when I was 6, I lost my eternal grandmother. Looking back now, that was my first interaction with spirit. I went almost into like a very hypnotic state and I could feel her energy. And so that was my first encounter really with the spirit world. And I'd like to say that from that point on, I saw spirit and it was in my life every day and that kind of thing. But that's not the case. It was kind of dormant. I was getting energetic hits and vibrations psychically. I always knew when people were lying to me, even adults. So that presented its own set of challenges being a child and having that level of wisdom. But fast forward to my mid 30s when I started to study healing modalities and messages started coming through faster and faster for people. And I knew I needed to do something with it to help other people heal. So the work that I do is really about healing and service.
When you first began noticing these experiences, did you feel supported in exploring them, or was it something you mostly navigated privately?
Actually, I was very supported. Even growing up, we had awareness in our household that my dad was very psychic. And so it was something that we talked about as a family, but not necessarily outside of the family. In that way, I was supported, which there was normalcy to it for us. In my 30s, when that all started to unfold, I had nothing but support from my loving husband and my kids. And I connected with someone who really helped me to get my start doing this work professionally. Worked with that individual for about 5 years and then struck out on my own. And that's how I got here today.
Well, support is so important to a fledgling who is just trying to navigate this way because there's really no one way to go about it. But we'll talk about more of that in a moment here. Now, Deb, you also pursued degrees in marketing and management. What was happening in your life during that time? And were your intuitive abilities already active or emerging more strongly during that period?
Yeah, so I went to college straight out of high school and I obtained an associate's degree at a local community college and then transferred to Siena University, where I received a bachelor's in marketing and management. And so when I came out of college, I wasn't doing anything related to this. I was doing work in an IT department at first, then I got into human resources, which I was in for several years. And then I was downsized right after our second son was born and started looking for work after that happened, after I was laid off. And nothing came. And so my husband and I were like, you know what? Maybe it's meant to be for you to be home with the boys. So I did that until my youngest was ready to go to school. And then I reinvented myself in the realm of education. And I spent 15 years doing that, working with special education and with at risk youth, which is where a lot of my trauma informed background comes from, because that's the other thing I'm passionate about is trauma and grief informed mediumship, because there are things that we can say and do that can be really damaging. So I'm on a mission to kind of educate people about that as well.
Well, you say that your work is trauma informed, which I think is really important. Why is this perspective important when you're holding space for people during a spiritual or mediumship experience?
Because people are seeking when they come to us, and many times people are also grieving. You can really do some damage by saying the wrong things to someone and really send them down the rabbit hole of challenges. And so I feel like it's important for us to use caution in how we address things. I'm not one to say, well, I had to tell her because spirit said. Well,
Mm,
we are souls having a human experience. And if something feels too humanly heavy, boy, we can do an awful lot of damage as mediums.
Well, and I feel like the number one rule is do no harm, right? It's
Absolutely.
what is really of value here. And sometimes you have to tread lightly depending on certain circumstances. And we don't know who's coming in or what they'll be sharing, right?
Hmm.
And so, how do we deliver this in a way that respects both parties? Now, mediumship can often be portrayed dramatically in popular culture, but the lived experience can be very different. What is something about communicating with spirit that might surprise people?
Well, my mom is very practical from spirit, and she was wonderful when she was here, just heart first in all things. Well, my mom also loved to get sales, especially for clothes for my sister and I. And my mom transitioned to spirit. She died in 2009.
Mm,
And whenever I get a nudge to go to a store, even if I'm not looking for something specific, I follow that nudge. And I know that that's my mom's way of connecting with me and getting me into the spirit of good sales, if you will. One of those examples was a few years ago. I wanted something neat for a wreath for my office door. And I went to a local department store because I'm like, why am I here? Why am I here, mom? And so I was just about to throw in the towel and say, I don't know what this was. And all of a sudden I look to the right before I'm going to go down the escalator. And there is the most perfect wreath, which is a beach theme. Now, if you can see my stuff behind me here, I've got that vibe kind of going. And so I knew that she had led me there to not only get that wreath, but it was also 70% off. So so
Great.
it can be surprising how practical spirit can be.
It's almost like having a personal shopper for having your mom as a personal shopper. But I always say, too, if people gave you guidance or advice when they were here on the physical realm, they're still going to be doing that in the spirit realm. It's almost like I feel people think they're going to change a lot when they move and transition to spirit, but their personalities are still very similar, which is so
Absolutely.
amazing. Now, Deb, you studied at both the Omega Institute and at Arthur Findlay College, which is in the UK. And that's actually one of my things that I wish to do at some point when I grow up. These are two very different environments for
Mhm.
spiritual teaching. What did each of those places teach you about mediumship that you couldn't have learned on your own?
Well, when I studied at Arthur Findlay, I was there for psychic studies, but mediumship obviously also came up. And what a wonderful experience to have. It really is like they say, it's like the Hogwarts for people like us. And there's these beautiful historic buildings, and you learn about Arthur Findlay and you see all of the wonderful spiritual ministers hanging on a wall. And it's really such a unique experience to say you've studied there. And just the physical campus alone is so magical. They've got beautiful gardens and trees, and there's horses next door. And there's so many wonderful opportunities to meet and study with people from all over the world. And
Mhm.
that was something that was really exciting for me when I was at AFC, was meeting people from all different places across the universe, the world, and that was really neat. And I really took to heart when I was there to say what you're getting. That's something that's so important. Instead of being shy or afraid of being wrong, just say what you're getting. That's something that's so important. And
Mhm.
also that we can work in different ways. You can work in a visual way that's more clairvoyant. You can work in an all-knowing way, of claircognizance. There's a lot of different ways to work, but yielding the same results, I think.
Mm.
So that was something really that I learned at Arthur Findlay, and really just being part of that global community is something that was so special.
The legacy too. The
Yeah,
legacy of the
absolutely.
history.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just really a neat place to be, and you're learning from some of the best tutors in the world.
And Omega is a fascinating hub in its own in
It
its own right.
definitely is, yes, and at Omega, I actually have studied trance mediumship and psychic detection, both with Tony Stockwell, and Omega is like summer camp, and so it's a lot of fun. Their season is nice and warm, or even going into the fall, and also there you're finding from people mostly from all over the domestic United States, but
Mhm.
also there are, I've noticed, a few folks from other parts of the world as well. So I love that. And community is something that's so important. And when you're at Omega and you're in one of those big conference rooms, you've got 70 other people around you, and you're all of the same mind. You're connecting with like-minded individuals. And that's something that's really important, is that sense of community. And you
Mm.
really feel that at Omega. Everybody kind of coming together and working together, and it's a beautiful campus, and it's just neat. You have the cafe there and the store there, and when I learned there, it really helped me to lean into my gifts, I guess, and to have deeper understanding of the practices, but also of myself, learning my own limits, learning my own boundaries, learning what works for me and what doesn't work for me was something that's so important.
Well, I'm curious, Deb, at what point did you realize that the role wasn't just to give readings, but actually to teach others how to access their own intuition?
Yes, and teaching is something I've always been passionate about, having spent those 15 years in education. When I worked in human resources, I also did teaching, in that I did training as well. So it's something that's been a part of my narrative for a very long time. And what I realized is that intuition isn't just for some people, it's for all people. And for me, I want that to be made accessible to everyone. That's really where that teaching component came from, was wanting to help other people unpack their own gifts. Because when you see the look on someone's face when they finally get an intuitive hit, girl, there is nothing like that in the whole wide world. And I absolutely love it. And so when I'm teaching, for me, it's straight from the heart. And I really love to see people get excited when they realize that it's not some exclusive club, that they
Mm.
can be a part of this too. And everyone can tap into their higher self, their intuition, connecting with loved ones in spirit. Everyone has access to that.
And I think that's the biggest misconception. I think everyone has the same access. It's just a little more focused in people, but that doesn't mean that you can't get to that place. Absolutely.
Absolutely, and I liken it to baseball because every single person can pick up a bat, but it doesn't mean that people are gonna work hard to be a major league player. So you
Mm,
have some people that wanna study, 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 wanna learn, wanna be open, wanna do that, and that's amazing, and then you have people that, yeah, they might have some oracle cards or they might have some things that they like to do for their personal practices, and that's okay too. Whatever level you wanna be at is
mhm.
okay, but it's exciting to know that the intuitive world is accessible to everyone.
So, Deb, you've taught at Lilydale, which is located in Western New York. And if listeners have not heard about it, it's the world's largest and oldest center of spiritualism, mediumship, and healing, which draws thousands annually to connect with deceased loved ones. And for me, I'm curious, what was it like for the first time you taught there, knowing you were part of that lineage?
That is something I'm so incredibly proud of and was so special to me. To be able to go and to teach there where some of the greats have, like Janet Nahovec, like Mavis Patilla, like Suzanne Giesman, all of these wonderful people make up this spiritual community. And to be able to have an opportunity to go and teach there, not only in person, but virtually, is something that has been such an honor. And truly, when you stand in Assembly Hall and you're teaching and you have all of these paintings of and portraits of those that have come before, it's really humbling and truly such an honor. And you can feel the history when you're there. It is steeped in history. And it just truly was wonderful to have the class full of people there. And I taught the energy of mediumship, so different tools and exercises that you can use to improve your mediumship to help you be a clearer conduit, and to be able to look out and see their faces and see those light bulb moments is something that is definitely unforgettable and I'm so super proud of.
I feel it's such an honor to be part of that unfoldment. Like, it's like, wow, I was able to just show them something and then they just kind of took off from there. Now,
Absolutely.
I also agree teaching is so important regarding like this isn't something that's just unique to us. Why is it important to you to empower others rather than simply be the person delivering the messages?
Because I feel like that's where the magic is. When we can guide others to broaden their horizons, to have better quality of life, boy, that's magical.
Mm,
And for me, that's why it's so important to get the word out there. Could I just be someone who delivers messages and things like that? Sure, I could do that, but it's not as fulfilling for me. I want others to be able to learn and say, you know what, I can do this too. I can pick up on things. And it's the excitement of the students that really keeps me going and helping me move forward in a way that is empowering, but also in a way that educates. So that's why I call myself an educational medium, because
mm,
really my heart is about teaching other people to unlock their own intuitive potential. And really, it's a quality of life issue. You have better quality of life when you're dialed into your intuition, when you're dialed into the unseen. And it's just really a wonderful way of living and being.
mm. Well, and you feel more confident in your choices. You feel more grounded in your choices. It's just a similar concept if you teach a person to fish
Mhm.
instead of giving them the fish all the time. There's something about them also feeling that confidence and that honor and that intrigue and excitement about learning this part of themselves. Now, you now are an incredible author, and you wrote a book called The Intuitive Entrepreneur: Deeper Connections for Soul Driven Success, with several co-authors. I think there what 21,
22 of us.
22 of you. And this book brings intuition into the world of business and leadership. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, I've had the title The Intuitive Edge swimming around in my brain for a couple of years, and I always thought it was for my clients. And what I woke up and realized one day was, no, it's meant for me. And so I had spoken with Laura DeFranco of Brave Healer Productions about possibly writing something that was business driven or about entrepreneurship. And she was like, let's do this. And so it was a big undertaking to wrangle 21 other authors, to get deadlines, to make sure we had titles and on time. So it was a big, big project, but to have 22 different perspectives in one body of work to me was so incredibly special. And I still really think of, yourself included, everyone that wrote on the project, is it was my dream team. Everybody really had so much to offer and so much to add from their, some were metaphysical businesses and some were other types of businesses. And so it really gave people a perspective about what tools they could use in their business and in their life, to be fair, of how to increase their intuitive awareness, to have better quality relationships. One of the chapters, Julie Spejans actually talks about collaboration as opposed to competition. And Donnabelle, in your chapter, there are these deep spiritual ritual information that's available to people. And so it really is such a truly wonderful body of work that I'm so proud of.
Well, and I love that there are always tools with each chapter. So everyone can read the story behind the way in which this person tapped into their intuition and then apply it towards their business. But Deb, many people still see intuition and business as separate worlds. What have you learned about how intuitive awareness can actually strengthen decision making and leadership?
Yes. Well, I have to tell you, I had one client who was the CEO of a national company, and she realized through the meditation and through being dialed into her own intuition when she was mentoring with me, she realized one day that it was time for her to take a step back from the company that she created
Ah,
and move from the role of CEO to what we call CVO, which is corporate visionary officer.
hmm,
Okay. And so it was really about her picking up on more vision, and such an unusual thing to step back as the CEO of your own company and go more into the founder role, which can be a little unnerving, a little scary, but she pushed through it and it's been a beautiful journey for her. So there are so many different ways in which we can apply intuition. There's a lot of people out there in the business world already using their intuition, but maybe they're just not calling it that. When people are following those gut instincts, when people are getting the nudge to trade a certain stock, or when real estate agents are clearing their spaces before selling with crystals or sage or things like that. So there's these small little practices that we can build in to all areas of our life, and it's not just exclusive to some people. It's
hmm.
for all people, which is something that's so exciting.
Mm. Well, and I think I read somewhere too that when most people rely on their intuition over, say, data, sometimes they are often 20% more correct in the outcome when they trust that intuitive hit about a particular, especially if it's like a big, big transition within a business, big transition within a company. Now, not only have you written a book, but you've also created a TV show, which you mentioned earlier called The Intuitive Edge, where soul meets strategy. I love that. The Intuitive Edge, where soul meets strategy on the Women's Channel. What drew you to creating a television show around intuition and spiritual insight?
Well, I wanted to put something out there that was going to be evergreen content. I wanted to put something out there that would allow people the opportunity to really speak up about the way they run their businesses, the way that they show up in the world. And the majority of our guests are spiritual practitioners. So they're psychic mediums, and some are Yusui Reiki masters, some people just doing all different sorts of things. So it's really neat. It's going to be a game-changing show because it's a different way to do business when you do it from your intuition. And so each episode is going to be a story about someone who truly lives life on the intuitive edge is using that skill set in their day to day to drive business for them.
How did the first episode go? Because I know this is a recent endeavor. First of all, launching it, that must have been such an amazing experience. But also, were there moments where the guests kind of shifted your own perspective about intuition and purpose?
Well, I think the first episode was wonderful and should be dropping soon. That's my hope. So, really, it was such an aha moment about collaboration because, gosh, it feels so good when you're collaborating with other people. My first guest, Julie Spegens, really talked about her journey and what that looked like and how intuition showed up and she followed the nudges. There's a lot to be said about collaboration. And that first episode, I feel like for me personally, really hammered that home because when we're collaborating, we're not competing. I think that's something that's so important and can sometimes be missing even in metaphysical spaces. It's about there being enough for everyone, which I think is a really wonderful way to be.
Yeah, I think with all types of work themes, work genres, whatever you want to call it, there's always this sense of competition. There's always
Mhm,
wanting to one up each other to kind of gain the whatever edge they have in the market. And I think it being in the spiritual space, it's gotta be a little different, but you're right, it actually is still similar in some ways. There's still some ego, and that's totally ego driven, but when
mhm.
we come back and sort of look at the bigger picture and really think about the community that we're being of service for, that has to take it to another place, and I love that you're collaborating with so many different people in so many different modalities. I think it also helps demystify some of these things for people. I find that a lot of it is just people just don't understand what we do.
Mhm.
So it's nice to expose them to other ways of working. So for listeners who are tuning in today to this episode and they may be thinking, I think I might be intuitive, but I'm not sure. What are some of the first ways you could help them begin trusting that inner signal?
I think part of it is teaching them low risk and no risk exercises so they can practice their intuition on their own so that they can start to maybe strengthen some of those psychic and mediumistic muscles independently. So, how do we do that? Well, one of the quick ways that you can do that on the daily is just try to figure out what color car is going to be parked next to yours in the
Hmm.
parking lot at the grocery store, or you might work on predicting what color a coworker is going to be wearing one day. So
Hmm.
I like them because they're low risk, no risk because you don't have to tell anybody.
Mhm.
And here's the secret. You're going to be wrong. Um, but that's how we grow. That's how we build those muscles. And no one is 100% all the time. Even people that do this professionally, like me, there are still moments where you're like, ah, gosh, not so great. So, there will be times where you'll be wrong, but you continue to practice. And I feel like it's so important for people to be lifelong learners, to be willing to take classes and build their pedigree and work with all different types of teachers. And I think that education for me personally, not only is it important for me to help others, but it's also important for me to continue to study, to continue to learn, to continue to hone my craft. And that's something that I think should be true for everyone that does this work.
We cannot possibly know all of it. And I think one of the famous mentors that I've worked with says, I'm 45 years in development. If you think about that, in development, 45 years, it's like it's never ending. And to have that curiosity sustain you in the work, I'm like, that's the joy. I think there's always something new to learn. And I love that you're like, play it safe. Just think about a color of a car. Like what I like about that, Deb, is that make it fun. I think when
Yes.
people try too hard, like they want to perform or they
Mhm.
want to get it right, it actually comes harder. It actually
Yes.
just makes it harder for them because it blocks any natural flow of information. So that's such a great exercise for listeners to try. I think I'm going to try that too. So I'm just
Absolutely.
like, oh, that's kind of a fun one. Now, this episode is co-creating with the universe here, just listening to the path of your story here, what do you think is co creating with the universe?
I think for me, it's listening to those nudges
Mm,
because when we're given information from the universe, spirit, God, however you call it, okay, when we're given that information, do we do something with it or do we just sit with it?
mm,
And so co creating with the universe is about ebbing and flowing, about saying, okay, yes, you're giving me this idea here. I'm going to bring it into the 3D world. It's about really listening to those nudges, even the really quiet ones, and acting on it. Also, that we can offer gratitude for those nudges. The more nudges the universe sends, the
mm.
more signs you get, and so co-creating is about giving a voice to your higher soul self, to the spirit world, and to education. That's so important.
And the flow, I feel like that flow is just you tapping in to whatever wisdom's already out there, looking for the vessel to make it real. Right?
Absolutely.
We are just
Yeah,
these conduits who are supposed to bring this thing into life here. And how many beautiful things were created when we listened, right? Like these
right.
incredible book that you wrote and this TV show. What does flow look like for you now, Deb?
Well, I think it is learning that I can do things even when I feel like I'm terrified.
Mm,
So Eleanor Roosevelt says you must do the things you think you cannot do. And so I've learned that even when it's scary, I can still show up, that I'm not going to die, that you can push through to get to that next level because we can be complacent and stay in our comfort zone. But where the real magic is where we say, holy cow, what am I doing? Am I losing it or what? And do big things. So it was stepping out in faith that helped me with the book. It was stepping out in faith saying, yes, I want to be the executive producer of my own TV show. And
mm.
so it's about being able to take those leaps and to trust. And that's what the real flow state is. And when you can learn to maybe set the fear aside, it can be so helpful. Because when we are in awareness, that it's not us, that it's spirit, boy, that takes the pressure off of me. When I know that I just need to be present and quiet enough to hear what they're trying to say, what they're trying to communicate, whether that be my team of guides or my loved ones, my ancestors in spirit, or angelic beings. Okay. It's about living in flow with what you're being given and really making it work for you here in the 3D world.
And trust is such a big component. And sometimes it's really hard to trust going, really? You want me
Mhm.
to do this?
Absolutely. And I cannot tell you the countless number of times I'm like, oh my gosh, I have this reading. I feel like it's going to be really big. What am I doing? Am I crazy? Should I still be doing this? So for me, being in the flow state is trusting more. And I'm learning. When I realized that I just had to be quiet enough to translate, that took the pressure off. And
Mm.
so it allows the information to flow more freely also. And so that's something that's been really exciting.
Oh my gosh. I cannot wait to see what comes next from you, Deb. You're always on the forefront. Where can folks find you and what you're up to?
So they can actually go straight to my website, debdecelle.com, and you can find media and publications there. You can find upcoming events there. You can book readings there. You can also find me on my social media on Facebook and Instagram. It's at Deb DeCelle Medium, all lowercase, all one word.
Oh my gosh, so many places to find all the incredible things you're doing. Deb DeCelle, I appreciate you so much in having this conversation today because you're really reminding us that living in flow doesn't mean that we're surrendering our power, right? It's really about learning to listen more deeply to the guidance that's already present within us and around us. And I know that your work helps so many people trust that connection and recognize that intuition isn't reserved people like us. Everyone has ability to access it. The language is available for all people and spirit can gently lead us wherever we need to go. So thank you for being
Absolutely.
on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Donna. My pleasure.
Thanks for being here. I hope something from today's conversation stayed with you or gave you a new way to look at things. That awareness, that pause, that's where things start to shift. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who might need it. You can learn more about my work and what's coming up at sonorouslight.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at @tohumIsHuman. Until next time, keep humming.